my son to go through the same feelings of why doesn't my grandma want to be a part of my life.
Okay. This is a really excellent question. It's so delicate because, first of all, one of the things that saves you is the fact that she's not even in the same state as you are, correct?
Right.
So
Yes.
it's just she can't really do that much damage, and she's a long-distance grandma, so he's definitely not bonding with her. So, you know, there's not a lot to explain there, other than when he gets a little bit older, he might ask how come grandma's not too involved, and then you have to have age-appropriate conversations about that as he's asking, which let's see if we can get into that a little bit. But right now the focus is that it's possible that your mother-in-law's treatment of your son and the family is triggering the neglect and abandonment that your husband was feeling all along. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah. So I really am a big fan of going back to the cause and the blueprint, because what's really on the table here is a lot of unfinished business between your husband, his mother, his absentee father, the negative core beliefs that he incorporated into the fiber of his being, which I talk a lot in my book, Be the Cause Healing Human Disconnect, which is available through my website and on Amazon, which I really highly recommend that you get because it really will connect the dots for everyone. And so this is not just about how she's treating him and the family in the here and now. This is a bunch of incomplete business that just, the old wounds are just being ripped open all the time when this gift arrives, and it's just kind of generic and empty and meaningless, and reminding of your husband how empty and meaningless the relationship is. And so I think that's what's really worth looking into, more than how she treats your son and you, because she's not going to change. This is not going to stop. So, right? I mean, she's kind of hurting herself because as she grows older, she will need her children to be available emotionally, maybe even physically. And if she's not investing into the family, well, the family's not going to invest in her. And if she truly is that narcissistically wounded, then she will not be able to connect those dots at all, and she'll just continue her way of distancing and not being involved and not being emotionally generous. And so, again, how are you going to deal with this with your son is your question, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and she is, just as a side note, she's very involved with my husband's half-brother and his 3 kids. They're in the same state and everything, and she's always, watched them consistently, watched the kids. So he and his ex-wife, at the time when they were married, so they could go out and have dates and everything. And I guess he's kind of the golden child.
Well, yeah, it sounds that way, and I think this is going to hurt him. So I think that rather than focus on what she's doing and what she's not doing, I believe that the focus should be on your husband's healing his own wounds of childhood so that he cannot make it to mean anything personal. Core beliefs that narcissistic parents leave children with are core beliefs such as you're not special, you're not important, you're not lovable. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And this is what's being triggered, and this is what needs to be healed. And I don't know anything about your parents. What are your parents like?
They are very conservative. We had I don't know, I guess I could best describe it by, it was just kind of a don't ask, don't tell relationship growing up.
Okay, so there's cutoff there also, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And my husband kind of idealized my relationship with my parents in the beginning, and we had a very, what seemed like on the surface, a healthy relationship with them, and I feel like he really got a lot out of that. And then as time went on, we had more honest conversations with them, and some of our honest conversations led to like 6 months of not talking at all.
Wow. Okay. So this is another thing. Expectations. Your husband seems like he's dying to have parents, healthier
Yes.
parents, and your parents seemed like those people to him. And now there's
Mhm.
been a big letdown, and he doesn't have necessarily the emotional tools and I call them psychological vitamins, right? That he was supposed to get from healthy parents, and so I really think that this is going to be the inside job, and so your parents and his mother are going to be on the sidelines, and what you guys create together as a family is going to be of utmost importance to your son. And that's what he's going to blueprint off of. And if grandma's not that involved, then at some point you can let him know, that some people don't have the same ability to love and care as everyone else. And it'll be a learning lesson for him. Some people are warm-hearted. Some people are open-hearted. Some people don't have the wherewithal to be givers. And you're going to teach your son that it's not personal, right? So that he doesn't develop core beliefs like that he's not lovable or that he's not wanted. And the grandmother's going to be very incidental. I really think that, because it's going to be you guys that are going to offer up the most. And that's why it's so important for both of you to be as healed as possible, so that the more healed you are, he'll get the most. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wouldn't worry too much about grandma in another state. I'd be more concerned about what it's triggering in your husband and what that then does to his mood. Maybe it makes him feel depressed. Maybe it makes him feel like, again, that he's not that important. And that's where I think the concentrated energy should be. Okay?
Okay. Okay, that definitely gives some insight.
Yeah, and
Appreciate that.
by all means, reach out to me, reach out for the team. You can always write me at Dr. Judy at psychologicalhealingcenter.com, and then we can go from there in terms of getting you guys in the best shape possible so that you can give the best to your children.
That sounds great.
Okay, thank you so much for calling in.
Yep, thank you for taking my call.
Of course. So there's a great example of how the in-law, right, is interfering with the marriage, and so again, it's going to draw attention away from the marriage, because that her husband is going to be so focused on his mother, and again, it seems like an enmeshment there, because the mother didn't give a lot, and so he didn't have a father, and so he probably put a lot of energy into narcissistic mother and being the supply there, and so this is going to infect the relationship. So again, I really encourage everyone who's in this situation to erect boundaries, and the boundaries that exist out there is anywhere from polite contact to really low contact to no contact in cases where the situation is really, really poisonous. So when it comes to daughter-in-law, mother-in-law, father-in-law, son-in-law, please understand that there are a lot of factors involved and triggers involved and cultural issues involved and expectations involved. And so this is just something that you have to speak about before you get married. And I think we have another call in. Hi, you're on the couch with Dr. Judy. What's your name, please?
Dale.
Hi, Dale. Where are you from?
Washington.
Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, I was thinking of the gal from Alabama and her husband, and without the father and the narcissistic mother.
Yeah.
I had a narcissistic father, and I was pretty much. I had a good life, but it was a neglected life. I had a golden child brother and large family, but very busy and very image conscious, and So a lot of things slipped through the cracks. We had a lot of different activity at home, which in the public eye was completely different. We were the shining example of a family.
Mm-hmm.
But the healing of that last caller's husband, I'm in my 60s, and it took me my whole life wanting to have a better relationship with my father.
Yeah.
And I was a people pleaser because I was constantly trying to please him, and I never could. I could never get approval, and it just was, like you had said, he was looking for a family or looking for a father and parents. And this past year, through listening to programs such as yours, it finally, the realization was made, and I think you guys did really good, your program in particular, that it's not your fault. You're an innocent child. You're brought into this world. You're given all of these psycho viruses that make you feel guilty, and you're always looking for what can I do better? And you're striving. You're blaming yourself, and you're always having these things put on yourself, and it's just this anxiousness. You can't explain it, why you feel empty all the time.
That's right.
But until you realize it's not you, it's your parent who is sick has been wounded and is bringing all of this on to you, and they're pushing all of their anxiety and their pain and their suffering, and they're blaming you, and you keep saying, what can I do better? What can I do better? You'll never be able to please these people. But when I finally realized that, the switch went on. I hit the aha moment last June, and it was like all of that anxiety, all of that pain, all of that disappointment, it went away. It was like a light switch came on.
That's your paradigm shift. There it is, right? You shifted from seeing yourself as responsible and burdened by the inability to fix it all to, wait a minute here, this was really inappropriate treatment that was not my fault.
And it was, it was through you showing the example of it. It was very, I'm an educated person. I think, wait a minute now. If it's not me, if it's something I can't fix, and I'm not to blame for all of this, and all of this was put into me, then why am I playing the game? And I got away from playing the game. And I tell you, it makes it so much easier to set boundaries, because now you no longer have that anxiety of like, well, gee, can I do better, or should I pull the boundary down, and should I cross back, and what can I do? You get rid of all of that because you realize not a thing you can do to change this person.
Beautifully said. You step out of the dysfunctional system, and one of the things that I emphasize in the mind map structure, the mind map counseling, is that things that are unsustainable are going to fall apart. And so that when parents build unsustainable systems, they're going to fall apart. And when the child realizes that they can't any further buy into this unsustainable system and they pull out, then what happens is everything that was dysfunctional falls to the wayside, and then that person can start to grow again and start to recode, as I say it. This is a process of encoding the sickness, right? And then decoding the sickness and then recoding into health. And your paradigm shift is very significant because, as I like to say, number one, childhood is a hostage situation because we can't help who our parents are. And secondly, we are not the cause of part two of our lives. And the better we heal, the better we're able to really let go of old dysfunctional systems, and we can buy out of the lie. And today I was joking with one of my patients, and I was saying to her, if only children can talk, right? Because children blame themselves. So let's say a parent does something completely inappropriate. Imagine if that baby said, "Are you kidding? WTF are you talking about? You're being completely inappropriate." I mean, what kind of parent would say such a thing to a child? But babies don't do that. Children don't do that because they're permeable membranes, and they have no boundaries, and they soak everything in, and the parents are like their God, and they believe everything. And it's not until you have an enlightened witness or more wisdom and more information that you're able to pull out and say, "I'm just not buying it. That doesn't work for me."
My closing statement would be: find out who you were in the family, who your family siblings were, who was the golden child, who was a hero child, who was a lost child, who was a mascot. Right. Learn what these terms mean. Learn who the narcissist in the family was, and study the tactics and see what they did. and then analyze how it affected you. And then once you know what the rules of the game are and how it was being played and who the other members of the family are, it all makes sense. And all of a sudden you go, I'm not guilty. I didn't do anything wrong. And all of a sudden the guilt goes away, the shame goes away, the anxiety goes away. My God, it just changes your whole life. And that's all I'll say.
I'm so impressed. That's right on. And then you don't have to play the game anymore. You're out.
That's right. Get your head in the ballgame. Know what this sickness is, so that you can learn what the rules are in the game and where you fit into it. Where did your family? How was your family structure? And it goes to grandparents, and it goes to aunts and uncles, and it goes to even your friends and coworkers. But once you know what this game is all about, it's no longer going to be a threat to you, and you're no longer going to have this internal, gee, I'm doing something wrong. I'm doing something wrong, because the game is, you will always be blamed for everything, and you're always going to feel this anxiousness.
That's right. Right. And the gig is up. So, no, I really appreciate you putting it in those terms. And also because you did have that insight, and now people can see how you arrived to that insight. So thank you very, very much for calling in. I really appreciate it.
Judy.
Of course.
Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Bye-bye. And so when it comes to in-laws and outlaws and boundaries and issues, again, you know, what Dale said, study your position in the family system and understand that if you and your mother or your father were enmeshed, then you can already see that adding a spouse to the formula is going to be competition to that individual, and they're automatically not going to be welcome. And if you, as a son or daughter, if you're a people pleaser, and particularly a pleaser of your parent, then you're going to lean in the direction of being a betraying kind of a spouse, because you don't want to let your parent down. But again, I'm reminding you, your number one person once you get married is your spouse, your partner. So with that said, I want to do a quick rundown of Shrink That Tune. And I have it here somewhere in my mess of notes. Okay, so this is a song by Huey Lewis called Mother-in-Law. How appropriate. Okay, so I'm going to shrink this quickly. Mother-in-law, mother-in-law, the worst person I know. Mother-in-law, mother-in-law, she worries me so. Mother-in-law, mother-in-law, if she leaves us alone, we could have a happy home. Sent from down below. Mother-in-law, mother-in-law. Satan should be her name. Mother-in-law, mother-in-law, to me they're about the same. Mother-in-law, mother-in-law. Every time I open my mouth, she steps in trying to put me out. How could you stoop so low, mother-in-law, mother-in-law? Come home with my pay, mother-in-law, mother-in-law. She asks me what I made. She thinks her advice is a contribution. If she would leave, that would be the solution. Don't come back no more, mother-in-law, mother-in-law. And this goes on into mother-in-law. And so this is Huey Lewis and mother-in-law. And I think that this is almost the evil mother-in-law has become almost like a prototype or something in our society and worldwide. So once again, this is Dr. Judy, WTF. Thank you so much for all the wonderful call-ins and comments. And if you are stuck in a bad family dynamic, then understand WTF is going on. Learn about your childhood wounds and your core beliefs. And once you can dissect that and see how this bad game of life is played, you can reshuffle the deck and play a better game of life. So thank you for tuning in, and we will continue the show next week. Good night, everybody.